Hello, you lucky ducks. Welcome to episode 2 of Wargaming Waffle, where we put a wargaming topic at random in a sausage machine or a mangle and see what comes out at the other end. So, Robin, what are we talking about today?
Building armies, but how you build armies and themes, maybe, rather than how you pick killer units and maximise points.
Yeah.
Or not points, doesn't have to be points.
No. So you will see, well, at least the more observant among you, there's an army right here. Interestingly, this army is going to be featuring on the channel very soon in a battle report, and we thought it'd be a good way to start talking about this topic by explaining how this got put together. So we decided, didn't we, we'd have a 750 point bolt action game.
Yep.
And this is a British army, so it's plucky. And it's basically been put together as a platoon. I keep saying company, so platoon with some toys around it. So we've got 3 infantry sections there. They've got a brain in each. Got the officer there with his Batman. We've got an artillery observer because you get them free. And we've got a sniper team, Vickers team, mortar team, and a universal carrier. So I figured I could start telling you about how I put this one together. This was obviously it's just mostly off of a force organization chart, like a what's the official? Yeah, what does that even stand? Tell the viewers what TOE stands for, would you?
You have to cover it, so I cannot.
Robin, would you like to explain to the viewers what TOE stands for?
Table of Organisation and Equipment. So
That knowledge.
you've pulled this from whatever pamphlet or thing the British Army was operating off at the time and just copied it.
Absolutely. So this is 1944. The idea is this is Normandy, pretty fresh off the beach, so there's no casualties yet, and it is, yeah, exactly what I found on that organisation chart. Except this is bolt action, which I think lets you play with a few toys, and so the sniper team are in there. The universal carrier is obviously chucked on there because they were everywhere, and I really like that mini. So it's put together to be fairly historically accurate, which I don't always do for bolt action, but I figured given we're planning on having a few games where we'll have more than one battle with this army and we'll see how it takes casualties and what have you, it might be quite a good place to start actually. And do you know what? I think it looks really pleasing having the big units of infantry.
Yeah, I think
it's nice because you see a lot of bolt action armies where it's like 5, 6, 7.
Yeah, I think especially when you're playing a platoon level game, you probably want to start with a full size platoon, partly from a historical point of view, but at the same time, no one probably fought full strength, but you've got to have a gameplay point of view as well, and saying, oh, I'm going to start with a really understrength platoon probably doesn't, depending on the scenario, probably doesn't create such an enjoyable game because you're on the back foot straight away. So I think rather than taking loads of toys or whatever, but you take your full squads.
So that's interesting because a tournament player would absolutely probably disagree with you, and I know that I'm not a power gamer, but I know enough about the tournament scene that actually taking these units in 7s, just having rifles is quite good. But that's the difference, isn't it? It's that you can take tournament stuff.
Yeah.
And you can take stuff like this.
Because you're paying per figure from I assume you start at 5, don't you, I think? In the middle.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're paying per figure. You can do anything, but you could, I guess it depends on your perspective, because you could be paying per figure but then taking 7, but not because you want to min-max the number of Brens or something in your army. Just because you actually want to represent a platoon that's slightly under strength. But if you want to maybe explore the historical setup and how it's meant to operate, that's probably easier to do with the size platoon or numbers of men in the squad that the platoon's designed to operate with.
Yes.
If you want to replicate have a go at replicating the tactics.
Which is interesting because I feel like bolt action, I really like the rule set, but it's not for me a Second World War simulator. It's really quite an arcade style game, which is why I think I'd also be happy taking units of 5 men, and I always have to come up with a rough narrative in my head as to why they'd be there and they'd be like that, and I'd say they've taken a lot of casualties or something.
But with how bolt action works, you could take units of 5 men for a purely historical reason. If you, and I can't remember the theatre selection off the top of my head of how many squads you're allowed, but if you wanted to play very historical and you ignored that and said, I'm going to take 6, I know you have to, you're capped at 5, but 6 5-man squads, but if you only put a Bren in every other 5-men group, you would be able to have a fire group and a manoeuvre group.
Yes.
They wouldn't quite be the sizes that the manual dictates, but you'd be able to try and replicate that on the table within the framework of bolt action, and you're not doing it for a competitive reason.
Yes, which is something I had considered, and actually it sort of brings me on to another point, which is, for me, so the main topic of this is obviously when you choose an army, what is your motivation for choosing it like you do?
Yeah.
And for me, the rule set I'm playing is a really big one. For bolt action, I feel like the only limitations I have really are on my own self-imposed limitations.
Yeah, of what you want to see.
Yeah, and I always have to have a reason for doing stuff. If I'm playing Crossfire, then I'm thinking it's got to be a platoon or a company.
Yeah, depending on the level you're.
Depending on the
but
level you want
so
to.
your mentality changes based on the rule set and how
I don't see
accurate you perceive it to be. Accurate might be quite the right word, but
yeah, that was what I was struggling with. Is what is the word to describe it? Accuracy, probably not, but I guess the mentality you have playing it. I think bolt action I see as a really fun game, which has a Second World War skin over it, but it actually could be used for loads of different settings. But Crossfire is one where the way it works is really, really set for Second World War.
Yeah, you're not doing anything else.
Yeah, and so that encourages me to be a lot more accurate with how I take my troop dispositions. And I think, interestingly then, the way they work, they've got rules for vehicles, which I think are terrible, so I just don't ever bother with them.
No, it's designed to represent an infantry platoon or company. It's designed for company, isn't it? But there is a platoon variant which actually is a bit easier, more manageable to play than the full company version. Certainly if you're playing at 15 or 20 mil scale. But yeah, I think there's something to be said for taking the core basic thing with only 1 or 2 elements that would, and I don't think a Vickers machine gun is an exotic item by any means, is it? They're pretty key to.
Yeah, but I'd be pretty impressed if you had one in your shed.
Well, I wouldn't mind one in the shed, but I guess that also applies to other periods, doesn't it? If you were playing Napoleonics, which one day we'll get around to, then I don't know, me personally, I probably wouldn't take, unless I was following a very specific order of battle and really trying to fit a whole battle in or a specific bit. I'd say I was taking 5 battalions. They're probably 5 battalions of, and it was French, 5 battalions of regular line infantry. Maybe 1 light battalion. I probably wouldn't bother doing the Grenadier of the Guards and the more exotic. I think I personally like the basic guys because they're the core building block of every army. There's only 1 division, battalion, whatever it is, of Gurkhas. I'm not putting Gurkhas in every single.
Well, I mean that's the thing with this, isn't it? Is it the Kugelblitz?
Yeah.
They only built something like 20, but
Pumas.
Yeah, Pumas. I mean, there's more Pumas in Warlord's Warehouse than there are ever built in real life. Phenomenal. I think that's the thing with bolt action. Like I say, because my German list actually, the one that's got the tiger in it, which you can find elsewhere on the channel. The list is designed to be 1,000 points. I wanted to do something I could paint over a Christmas period. As it happened, it was 3 months, but just a long Christmas. And it had to have the tiger. That was the whole point for taking it. And that's such a big point thing. I'm looking at the rest of the list and thinking, if I could take an infantry platoon, but then I'd have an infantry platoon and a tiger, and it doesn't feel quite rounded enough, interestingly. So, and also, if I'm honest, I did design the German list to be what I consider to be strong.
So it's a bit more. Trouble is, I guess you get to 1944 with the German list, it's hard to say what's historical and what's not, because it might just be a case of grabbing random squads and just going that way, please.
Well, exactly. So when I said before I had to have that narrative reason for things, that was my narrative reason for this.
Yeah, it's easy to justify stuff.
Yeah. The freedom of poverty. That was my thinking, and it was the idea that the list had to be fairly strong, because heavy tanks are really fun, and actually they're terrifying if people are not prepared for a heavy tank, but really they're not that strong. So I had to have something where I felt like I can try and prove the worth of a heavy tank. So I chose a list that I felt would do that.
Actually, that does create a thing for generating a fun game. And remember, you've written both lists. There's a heavy tank in one.
Well, to clarify, not this one is a 750 point list.
Yeah,
the German list is 1,000.
Yeah. So
there'll not be a tiger going in a 750 pointer.
But if you were taking, say you were playing someone comes to your house, or I come to your house, or down the club or whatever, and you were planning on, I want to try this out because it's got a tiger. I've made this quite cool list. It's got some nice bits in it. Really just wanted to paint a tiger because that's what I wanted to do. Would you tell your opponent, by the way, I'm going to be bringing something big, because yes, there's the whole the challenge of how you deal with things, but it would be rubbish might be a bit rubbish if I turned up with my 10 man infantry squads, 2 snipers, a mortar and a MMG.
Yep.
And then you put a tiger on the table, and I just went, yes, I can.
But you've got a Piat.
Yes, I guess I could throw that at you. But I would say, okay, right, well, yes, obviously, scenario design.
Yeah. So, I mean, I wouldn't want to rob you of the chance to say, bring forth the Piats, and then watch them not do anything as the tiger rolls forward. But actually, I would always tell my opponent that I'm bringing that, because firstly, when I put that list together, I told all my friends, I've got a tiger.
Yeah, so if they want to bring the 17 pounder, but then it's a choice they make. If they go, actually, I don't want to spend the points on the 17 pounder or the Firefly, well, then now it's your problem. You've got to figure out how to avoid the tiger or deal with the tiger. That's your challenge now.
Yes.
But
so I've done that, and I've also when I took the tiger against people and it just deleted their units, I let them then turn the tables. So one of my friends has got a German list, and I insisted that he take a panther. He's got a panther, so he brought that.
They are cooler than tigers. That's a separate segue.
The door's over there.
Panther's a better looking tank. It's more fun to paint. It's better than the tiger.
No. 999. Tell us in the comments what you think. Panther or tiger? It's tiger. Anyway, the real answer is King Tiger, or Königstiger.
The real answer is Jagdpanther, actually.
Oh, yeah, they're nice. How silly were the Germans building all these massive... This is a total tangent, but what the hell were they doing? What were they thinking?
They're so fun to paint.
They are.
A model.
Oh yeah, they are. 100%. That's what they were thinking of.
That is obviously
when Speer
what
came
Speer
in.
was going on about.
Yeah.
It's like, actually, and someone can design the model of this.
Mein Führer, we must build a tank which is great for modelers in the future. Excellent idea, Albert. Get on that now.
And let's make the camouflage as fun to paint as possible.
Oh yeah. I do love a bit of olive drab, but that camo.
You can do a lot with olive drab. I just don't know how you're then straying into which I have no problem with at all, the artistic side of modelling than the risk, because I find tanks in museums really boring to look at. Really boring. Ignoring the ones that they paint the wrong colours, because they're just one thing. Because they've got new paint on, and they're really boring to look at and do nothing for me.
But
that's a confession.
That is a confession. I never thought I'd hear that from you. Well,
with your army building though, I think, especially from bolt action, if we're going to playing some games of that, the freedom we have to say, start with a full platoon. I don't necessarily have to carry casualties across linked games, but the ability to model an understrength platoon, or probably the best way of doing it I found from the games I've played, is have 1 or 2 full strength squads and say that they've pulled the casualties from, so that you've got 1 understrength squad. I think it gets a bit bitty when you get down to lots of very small, 3 very small squads without you.
Yeah, see, that is the criticism of my German list, is I've got these 2 Osttruppen units in there that are purely there for order dice. So they're the minimum you can take of 5 men. I think that's about 30 points or something outrageous. They do nothing but sit in ambush the whole game and give me order dice, and that's why they're there. But again, that is that, it's not a tournament mentality, but I needed to make the list competitive so that it could turn up and again.
Competitive doesn't have to mean competition though, does it?
No.
It could be competitive as in, I needed to make the list work in a game and actually give my opponent,
it's something to think about.
Give my opponent a fun game, because actually just chasing a tiger around the table, I don't know, for a specific scenario it might be okay, but for a game it's probably not the most entertaining game to play. So you need that bit of balance to make the game work for both sides, I think, don't you?
Yeah. But what is interesting is, actually, I was thinking about this as well, and that when I put a bolt action list together, or even Second World War really, I feel like I don't mind what regiment this is or anything like that. This could be any regiment.
Yeah.
Whereas when we did the super secret project we have, which I'll tell you about when the time is right. The time is now right. So the super secret project is it 10 mil? 6 mil? 6 mil.
It's a bit off piste.
It is off piste, yeah. It's a 6 mil Crimean War project. And we sat down and we were on the phone and we were going through the orders of battle for the Battle of the Alma or whatever it was, and looking at what regiments were there and buying stuff to match that.
Yeah, they're going to match up. I think flags will, where flags are involved, we need to work out exactly, but things will match up, and maybe when we recreate the battle as close as we can, things will be deployed where they were. So that, I can't remember off the top of my head, because obviously it was a couple of months ago since we first started it, but the left flank will be the light infantry, whoever it was there. Whereas I'm the same. When I do my World War II stuff, I'll pick markings. I think all my British stuff is marked up as 11th Armoured Division for a bit of consistency. But what actually, really in my head, what defines who they are is what scenario I'm playing. So if I'm playing something around Caen, they might actually be the Wessex Regiment or the 52nd Division, something from the 52nd Division or whatever. And then with the Germans, it gets even more twisted up, doesn't it, of who's who and what's where. So I'm not super fussed about what marking. No, the individual markings on the vehicle have to be right, but I'm quite happy to put an 11th Armoured Division marked Sherman on the table and play a scenario where actually it would have been the 7th Armoured. Not that.
Yeah.
Not that bothered by it.
No. But I guess I kind of, what I'm trying to get in my head to reach a kind of a point that I was reaching for is, again, the idea that it depends on not just the rule set as to how historically accurate I want to go, how I approach the army building, but what do I even want from the project? Because this is a project where I want to play loads of different games. The scenarios will be made up between the 2 players there and then, out of the rule book or maybe historical. But the Crimean one is a specific historical period that we've gone for.
Yeah, the 2 or 3 battles, but
Yeah.
there'll be some fictional stuff in between.
Yeah,
But
I just like
there'll be remnants of those battles potentially as running.
yeah. And we both like the idea of saying like it's a kind of cut off. It's the Crimean Peninsula, isn't it? It's kind of cut off, and you've got what you've got. I've got what Raglan had. You've got whatever Raglansky. What's the Russian commander called?
Honestly, can't remember.
Putting you on the spot there.
Yeah, I think it was Prince somewhere or other, but
Yeah.
There's only so much stuff there. Whereas
Yeah. Whereas with this, you're putting something together to just be flexible and.
But this is the building block, isn't it? You build your paint your 30 or 40 infantry.
Yeah.
And that's your core for platoon level gaming. That's your core platoon, and that core platoon, because the historical works in every single. Also, obviously, if you're playing chain of command, the building block of your army is you start with a core platoon, and yes, it can be in the pint-sized campaigns. It might be adjusted slightly, but generally, you start with that, and again, they start with the paper strength organisations, a full 10-man squads, for example, for the British, so that you can get the most out of exploring the tactics and the thing on the table, and then you bolt on a few things that might be scenario dependent or just choice dependent.
So here's a contentious one: the issue of balance. That word that we all love. I feel like in certain games, I would be way less likely to worry about that and actually not even bother with points or trying to balance the armies in terms of size. It would be more what would be representative of what would have happened.
I think balancing a platoon level World War II game, for example, because that's what we're going to be playing next, hopefully, isn't it? Is actually really easy.
Well, yeah.
Because you just take a platoon each, and then a guy with a gun is a guy with a gun. We're not playing super soldiers with weapon skill 10 versus inferior soldiers with weapon skill 2.
Of course, I mean, if you ask Max Hastings, man for man, the German soldier was better than the British soldier, which is just rubbish.
Wrong, isn't it?
It's just wrong.
But you take that and you could do what you want. You could say, okay, we're going to take the core platoon and that's going to be free, and you're going to have 300 points to spend on supports. You could be playing chain of command, but that's free anyway, and then you follow the scenario guide for you roll up to see how many support points you get. It's a very similar concept. You could just say it's a full platoon, but we're going to remove D4, D6, D5, if anyone can find them, miniatures from it to represent some casualties and how under strength they are, and then you're going to add some sports to that as well.
So yeah, doing this is quite easy. What I actually think as well is a lot depends on my knowledge. I know quite a lot about the Second World War, but at the minute I'm doing Wars of the Roses stuff, which I know nothing about beyond a couple of books I've now read. And that's really challenged me in the sense I don't even know who would have what kind of a flag, who would wear what particular livery. And that's meant in some ways I've been a bit more almost paralysed. Can I build this now? Can I do this in this way? And in other ways, a lot freer because I think, meh, who cares?
There's no photos.
Exactly.
And yes, there's lots of research, but obviously it helps if you know someone who's massively into Wars of the Roses and can give you some information. But again, same with doing mine, it's been a case of just do lots of basic infantry. Decide what the basic army unit or unit in the army is going to be. So in that case, bill and bow, and whether your rule set has them combined or has them separate, that's what the majority was. So again, it's your basic dudes with a hitting stick.
Yes.
Or a shooty thing.
I feel like you're right. You can't go wrong building an army from your basic blocks.
Basic dudes.
Yeah, because that's what I've done is the bill and bow units. I mean, I've only done one because actually painting it drove me mental, and I did a footlads unit because I wanted to paint some armour because it was easier, and then I did some cavalry because I had some. But it is the bill and bow units that are going to make up the meat and potatoes of it.
Yeah, they're going to be, I don't know, I think I've got my army's not massive. Well, 10 units. I think 6 of them are bill and bow units.
But what is interesting is I don't feel the pressure to be. Feel the pressure is the wrong way of doing it. I don't feel like I want to be historically accurate in the sense that I will look at the Perry's range and go, I want a gun. I want a big artillery gun. I don't know whether they would have been very common. I'm led to believe that they were on most battlefields, but that might not be true.
Yeah, no, I think.
But I want one, so I'm going to do it. Whereas with this stuff, if I'm putting a German army together, I look at the Kugelblitz. I might think,
Shouldn't have that.
yeah, probably shouldn't have that.
Yeah, I think there's less. I think the further back you get, there's actually less. Well, not the further back you get, because obviously certain armies were very organised. Maybe the Romans were, but if you use Wars of the Roses example, a lot of it comes down to fighting in a blob.
Yeah. I'm really glad we used the technical terms.
At small level, they did have. I might be making this up, and someone can correct me, but they definitely used. Well, platoons came around in what, 7 Years' War, maybe slightly earlier. They were using platoon because they realised that someone else had mentioned it before that one guy, the most people you can organise is about 30 guys.
Yeah.
Any more than that, and it's not manageable.
Yes.
So even going, in your Wars of the Roses unit, your bill and bow unit, there might be 100 guys. It depends what your unit's representing, but there will be sergeants at arms and people within that. But I guess the scale of the battle, you're not replicating that level of command quite as much. You're a scale up, aren't you? You're almost playing probably bigger than a company size war team. You're playing a divisional game almost. What you've got on the table is representing half a battlefield or a mile front or whatever. So it's a different level of thing, which then gives you more flexibility, doesn't it? Like, our 6mm Crimea project, we're not going to be too worried about what the guy at the end of the rank is doing and whether he's got his rifle at port or whether he's following the firing manual. It's not our problem.
No.
You're commanding divisions.
That's true. Yeah, that's a good.
So you're worried about, is the command and control structure accurate rather than the disposition of your 9-man unit or your 10-man unit or your 5-man unit.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. I'd not really thought of it like that, but that's where logic was taking me to. I just never made the final leap.
Yeah.
But that's a very good point. I'm trying to think the other game systems. So, for example, one that I'm looking at the minute is Saga, and I've bought myself some Anglo-Danes. Sorry, boy. So I bought myself some Anglo-Danes, and really, the theme I'm going for is a strong theme of men with big axes.
That's a solid theme.
I think it's a solid theme, and again, this is something where I have a real interest in that period. I want to learn loads about it, but I haven't yet, so I don't know anything.
Yeah, I mean, it's cool. I mean, Saga's and I love Saga, but Saga's a fantasy history game, isn't it? Because obviously you've got the depends. No one ever quite knows what you're actually playing. Are you reliving the guy telling the story 50 years later? Are you reliving the battle from someone's perspective who might have been a bit drunk and thinks that a god smoked someone? Was there actual magic? Or are you just playing dudes hitting each other with big sticks again?
Well, when I'm the one playing, options 2 or 3 are definitely possible.
Yeah, so...
But yeah, I think that's what I like about, again, getting into the idea that I don't have any knowledge and it's Saga, so really it's about big tales and epic deeds.
Yeah, but you want your models to look realistic.
Yeah.
Well, you might not actually. In Saga, you might decide you want to chuck in some winged helmets and women from Valhalla. But obviously there's lots of ranges out there, like the new Victrix plastics or pre-existing gripping beasts, metals and things like that, where they've copied Radwold's helmet and things like that, things that are unknown to exist. So your accuracy is, well, no, the figures look right.
Yeah.
Again, it's one guy shouting at 30 dudes to do this, do that. It's a platoon level game.
So here's a question for you then. If you were going to be doing a game and it was for a period that we know very little about, and certainly not enough to say at this battle there were these units and they were stood here and they did X, Y, and Z, how would you go about building an army for that?
Okay, so if we were doing biblical warfare using Hail Caesar, for example, I know there's some sea people, some Hittites, and I know that there's chariots and people armed with basic hand weapons. So I'd paint up. If we said, oh, we're going to play on a 6x4, so we can't have too much stuff, and you're going to paint 10 units, I'd probably paint 2 units of chariots, 6 units of guys with basic guys, and then flick through the book and see if there's one, like Royal Bodyguard unit or horses or something mounted. Maybe I'll just paint your basic guys.
Because it's interesting that it feels almost like that's how I remember building armies for Warhammer back in the day, in that you'd take your pleb units and then you just hit the ones you liked.
Yeah, but I don't know if you took, because the pleb units, one thing I think I used to see from Warhammer playing back in 4th, 5th, 6th edition, is you never, very rarely saw, say Empire, let's say Empire armies for example, you didn't see, obviously heroes took up a lot of your points and blah blah blah, but you didn't get 4 units of halberdiers on the table, because people wanted a unit of halberdiers, a unit of handgunners, a unit of the really cool kit that you can build as like single hand and shield, because they wanted one of every variation.
Yeah.
You didn't, whereas realistically you'd probably go, okay, well, if I'm building 10 units I should have 5 units of halberdiers rather than 4 steam tanks.
Steam tanks.
But yeah, I think that, because you wanted the variation, because actually everything had its own cool little rules, whereas in historical games, even I'm playing some Crusade games recently, and there might be some heavy cavalry coming in at some point. Well, they don't have these cool extra rules, they just have a slightly better save because they're heavier. There's no special powers associated with them, so actually you're more inclined to just take your basic dudes because you don't feel like you're missing out.
Yeah. Yes, but I mean, it all comes down to, I think, then there's that, it's almost like a triumvirate of rule set, what you want the project to be, and the knowledge you have. For me anyway, it all comes together. And also actually the models you have, because I don't have...
It does come an element of just having to paint what you can...
Yeah.
Or if you want to start playing, your Ostrippen and Tigers, if you want to do 1,000 points and you want to get it painted in 3 months for a game, well, taking a Tiger or a Panther is a way of using up the points, so you haven't got to paint as much, which is a perfectly valid... I want to start playing, I'll come back and finish up the... But again, nothing would be wrong with saying, oh, I've painted 20 British riflemen, I'll take, do the maths, 3, I'm going to paint 21 actually, so I'll do 3 7-man squads. Well, nothing stops them later then coming back and painting the other 9 and making them up to 10-man squads later on, so you can actually get playing the game and be enthusiastic to paint more.
Yes. Yeah, that is a good point. I mean, playing games always gets me actually painting. If I'm not playing a game, I won't paint. It's
getting that core done first, isn't it? Because you can't play a game really till you've done that core. Whether it's 4 units of Bill and Bow for Wars of the Roses, because then that's half an army done, or whether it's 3 10-man squads, an officer, and a Piat team for the British in World War II, and then that's your core platoon done. Because you can play now.
Yeah.
And now I haven't got to paint 30 guys again. I've got to paint. I can get the airbrush out and paint some vehicles, or I can paint a 3-man team over a weekend or whatever. I've only got to do 3 guys, but I've added something now.
Yes. I was going to. Can you think of any rule set that doesn't have a stipulation about how many core, for want of a better term, the core blokes you have that you need to have in your army?
think they all have I think all historical. Well, no, actually, yeah, like you said, even the fancy ones. Well, there might be variations. The handgunners, the halberdiers, and that are all still the core basic units. But no, I think they all have your core. Apart from very small skirmish games like Spectre, you're going to be taking like say a SEAL team of 4 guys or whatever. That's it. That's what you've got. But once you start getting above platoon level and up, I can't think of any rule set. They all do it in different ways.
Yeah.
Because bolt action doesn't force you to take any squads from the basic theatre level. Right? It's 0 to 3 squads if you're doing it out of the rule book. I think.
I think you need 2. There might be a compulsory unit.
Should we just quickly, just for the sake of...
Well, we've had the book on the table.
We have had the book on the table and we are going to... yeah, sorry, it's the pluses. Yeah, so I think, because regardless of how accurate a rule set, well, I'm not sure I will say accurate, but you've got to have your basic...
Yeah.
Your basic dudes.
You've got to have that core. I think that's a...
Whether it's a core company, a core division, or whatever it is, you've got to have...
Well, it's just funny, it strikes me now looking at it. It's obvious to say you want to build a core and build around it, but it's funny that now I think about all the different ways I've come into a project, whether it is from having the knowledge, and going, this is what I'm going to replicate, or I'm going to look at this line of battle, or I don't know anything about this. You always end up, or I always end up thinking, I need that core. These are the core units. I'm going to start with these.
Even if you do that, there's projects I've done where I've painted up the core, then got distracted because such is my want. But I wasn't too bothered because I'm like, okay, when I come back to it and actually get ready to play some games, that's done. I can play. I can add to that now. It's getting that core done. Now, I guess the only white games that you don't have that, other than skirmish games, maybe aerial games, but again depends on scale, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Naval games, because not every ship is different, but the ships are all individual. There's not... You have building blocks, obviously, because you'd have your groups of destroyers and groups of cruisers.
Yeah, so you say naval, and it's interesting, because if I'm thinking of... when we're playing Nimitz, for example, would I ever go with all battleships? No.
No.
But then that would have happened.
But that's more from a tactical point of view than because it's not ahistorical to make it have just battle.
No.
I'm ignoring the things like Bismarck and that being individuals against, because that's a different kind. That's not it's a naval battle, but that's different. That's a very specific scenario, isn't it, where you have one battleship being hunted down. But tactically, you'll be missing something without having your, I guess you could call them your cruisers and your basic dudes, because if you don't have them, you haven't got torpedoes, you don't have as much manoeuvrability or speed. But you'd also probably not have that enjoyable game, because you'd probably just sit 34 inches away or whatever, rolling dice.
Yeah.
And throwing cars at each other, basically.
That's quite an image.
I guess if you go back further, your core units, for Trafalgar, actually everything's a core unit almost, because you've just got to paint a lot, but 74 gunners or whatever it was. Yeah. Actually everything's a core unit because they're all fairly similar. They might be slightly different, but they're all lots of the same thing again.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I think that's how armies are made up, aren't they? Lots of...
So really what we've done is we've sat here for half an hour, however long, and said armies through history know what they're doing. They have a core and then they put a few things around it. And if you want a good game, don't really deviate from it.
Certainly a good place to start from.
Yeah. So we went our way from Normandy to Saxon England through naval wargaming and the Wars of the Roses to bring you
Paint Basic Dudes.
Paint Basic Dudes. But that's a conclusion. Basic game next.
Basic game.
Basic game. You little dick. Just sat there like, what is that noise?